I am. Alright, so everyone just settle down? Alright, we're going to be talking about programming today. Does anyone have a idea what programming is? What is it? Speak loud.
Rearranging a bunch of simple tasks to do what we want as a whole.
Rearranging a bunch of simple tasks to do what you want. Kind of. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone want to give their idea of what programming is? Yeah.
It's basically a set of instructions that you set
Yep.
that the computer will then execute to do whatever you're trying to do.
I like that. It's giving a computer instructions to do something. So it's telling a computer what you want to get done in a language that it will understand. So there's different ways that you have to go and tell a computer what you want from it. So the first thing is to talk in its language. So there's a ton of different languages. Does anyone want to yell out languages?
Python.
C.
Good. C++.
JavaScript.
Good. Does anyone actually program in any of these? Good. Most of you guys. What kind of? Ruby, yeah. So, the way that you have to go and program in a language is by following its syntax. Does anyone know what syntax is? Yellow. The rules, kind of, yeah. It's how you have to write something so that the computer will make sense of it. So, in a normal language, you have to go and finish any statement that you're making, any declaration, with a semicolon. The semicolon lets you know that you're at the end of the line. That's the last, that you are telling it one full instruction. So let's do x equals 5. We need this semicolon right here to let the computer know that we're done with that line. So we went over semicolons. Then we also have brackets. Brackets are the way of saying that we're going to group all this stuff together. So we'll go over these in for loops and while loops. But there's also things like classes that, like the Arduino language, you probably won't use ever, but it's something you could use, or you won't use here. You should use them though. Who's coding in Arduino? All right, I'll teach you guys. So let's go over variables. What is a variable?
It's like X, for example, it's used to store something else that you can change.
Good. It's exactly that. Variables in a computer are stored in its memory somewhere. So we have x equals 5. So this is stored in its memory. So we have x over here, 5 over here. And we could have y and z. And this is currently unassigned, so nothing, and this is assigned to 2, let's say. So if we say to print out what is in x, what is it going to print out? 5. If we say to print out y, what is it going to print out? Nothing. But it's kind of hard to say nothing. So what will come out?
So depending on your language, it'll do null or none or something like that.
Yeah. It's either going to print out null, which is a way of saying nothing. It's a character that represents nothing. Or we could go and say, throw a error somewhere. That'll be a null error. Depending on the language, it'll come out differently, but those are things that could happen. Declarations are the way that you initialize a variable. So every variable is going to have a type. So what are some types that we know? Just yell them out.
String.
Int, string, floats,
Char.
chars. Does anyone want to explain what an int is?
Just an integer.
It's an integer, so it's a positive, negative decimals. Yeah. So floats are what?
They're sort of
No
like
decimals.
They're sort of like integers, but with more detail. So a float can have a decimal point. They take up more storage in memory, but they can be more specific.
Good. So those are things where you'll be able to have a decimal. So floating numbers are weird numbers because they'll have so much more depth to them. So one of the things that you always want to pay attention to when coding is to not use floats unless you have to, because they require a ton of computational memory. So if you're doing something that only requires you to be doing quantized numbers, numbers that are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, just use an int or use like a short or something that doesn't have these decimals off on the end. And if you can ever change your code so it's not like 5 times 0.5, do it something to the power of 2. Because we both know that dividing by 2 and multiplying by 0.5 are the same thing. So you can do something like that. Good. Assignments. Assignments are the way that you reassign something to a variable. So right now we have 5 in there. So if we do x equals 5 and then x equals 6, what's it going to be at the end of the program? 6. Easy enough, because you reassign what's in the variable. Functions. Someone start telling me what a function is. Just yell it out. You.
It's a sort of mini block of code that can be executed on its own. It's separated off, and yeah, it's like a small separate chunk.
Good. So functions are some way of letting you repeat code. So if you're going to be doing something 300 different times, you're going to want to write a function for that so that you don't have to write out the entire code that many times or copy and paste it. So let's think. Let's make this a square function. It'll take a number and it'll square it, and then add 1. So square 1 is the name of the function. So the way that we're going to write this function is by giving it some return value, some permission, and square. So let's say it's public, it's an int, and square 1. And then these are going to be what we put into the function. So let's say it's num. Int num. So I didn't talk about permissions yet, but permissions are what you're able to use to tell you who is allowed to use a function. So there are going to be 3 permissions. There's going to be public, protected, and private. You'll almost never use protected. So we're only going to talk about public and private. Public means that anyone can call a function. So these will be used for things like getters and setters to get a variable from a class or to set a variable, like assign the variable within a class. So if we have a class square, I'm going to use square. Rect. This will have different properties to it, such as length and width. So and then we're also going to have functions such as get length and set length. So in order to write to the function, write to the class, we need to use set length. So if we want to change its length, we're going to do rect1 dot set length or some setter method for how, depending on the language you're in, to set its properties. So I'm sort of jumping around. Sorry for whatever. So let's go back to functions real fast. So public is your permissions. So something like a get or a set is going to be public so that the user is allowed to operate on it, is able to change what's in rect. If you have something like private, a private function is only something that the function itself, or the class itself, is able to call. Int. This int here tells us what our function is going to return. So we want it to return an int. So whatever this entire function does is going to spit out an int. So let's go some more. This is our bracket, and then let's put a bracket down here. So everything that's going to be in this function, so we have some syntax here. the only thing that this function encompasses is what's in between these two brackets. Everything outside of those brackets is not going to be recognized as that function. So if you're calling square 1, it's only going to give you what's in the square. It's only going to return what's run here. So square plus 1. We're going to have x times x plus 1. Will this work as a function? Why not?
Because you're not setting it equal to everything.
Yeah. So what do I have to do?
You have to return something.
Yeah. So we're going to have it either return here, which will return into this int something. So how would I call that? What do you want to say?
Shouldn't you replace x with num since that's your...
Good. I'm just going to do that. Yeah. So good catch there. It should have been num times num plus 1, but I didn't want to write out the entire thing. So whatever is, so this is going to return an int that is x times x plus 1. Continue. Does anyone have any questions so far? Let's go into for loops. Does anyone know what a for loop is? Yeah.
It's sort of hard to explain having not done while loops yet, but basically, like a loop where you're doing
You
the
want us
same
to do
thing
while loops
multiple
first then?
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should probably do while loops first. It's like a while loop where you're doing the same block of code multiple times instead of writing it multiple times. A for loop is a more complex version where you have 3 different parameters. So you can set a variable, set the change of that variable at each time it runs, and set what that variable has to get to stop running.
Good. So I guess we'll start with a while loop first. A while loop is this. This is the general form for a while loop. So while something is true. While something is true, we're going to be going through this while loop until it's no longer true. So let's do while x is less than 5. We're going to do print x, and then what else? Does anyone want to take a guess? You're cheating. Does anyone besides these guys want to guess? Yeah?
X minus minus.
X minus minus?
X minus 1.
Not exactly. Or while x is less than 5. So it would be x plus plus. So let me just go over the syntax for that real fast. X plus plus is something that we use in some of the languages as an incrementer. That is the same as doing x equals x plus 1. It basically just moves it up one thing. So let's initialize x up here to be 1. Then while x is less than 5, we're going to print x. So it's going to print what?
Don't you need a type for x when you declare it?
Yeah, I'm just doing basic stuff right now, but let's say that x was already declared somewhere else. So what is it going to print out? Anyone want to say? 1, 2, 3, 4. Why does it not print 5?
Because the plus plus is after the print, so it's going to get to 5 and then not run again.
Good. So once we get here, we were at x equals 4. So we're able to stay in the while loop. So then we print it. We got to x equals 5. And now we want to go back and check if we can go back to the loop. But x is not less than 5 anymore. It is 5. So we can't go back to the loop and print it. All right. So back to for loops. So as you were saying before, for loops are a specific type of while loop. They're a while loop that'll continue for this. So there's 3 parameters that we're going to take for our for loop. So for the initialization, so x equals 1, the condition while x is less than 5, and then the incrementer, x plus plus. This is going to do the exact same thing that our while loop did, except it's more definitive. We'll let ourselves know exactly when it's going to end. And we know before we get into the while loop how long it's going to last. Because this is an entire statement. This will be x is going to go until it's 5 with known steps, known step sizes. So this is something that we can predict. And this allows the computer to optimize itself so that everything will run faster. So, same thing. Print x. Good? Any questions on that? All right. And then I'm going to quickly go over the Arduino code, since a lot of you people have been asking about it. So all of these things that I just went over can be entirely used in your Arduino code. Except the Arduino has to have 2 things in it. It has to have a setup and a loop. So who's already run into those and know what's what? All right. So the setup is what sets up your code. So when you start the Arduino up, when you first power it, this is what's going to give you all of your initial states. So this will give you your initial state and set up everything. So if you're going to be using servos, this is where you initialize what your servos are. So you're going to write that your servo is going to be used on pin 3. This is where you're going to set up your baud rate to go and say that your serial monitor is going to communicate on baud of 9,600. So this code is only going to get run once. Then the loop is the code that's going to get run an infinite amount of times, forever and ever and ever, or whatever else. So let's say you want an omnidirectional robot. Who wants to take a guess what's going to go in the setup? Who wants to take a guess what's going to go in the loop? Someone who's doing you. Yeah.
I think the setup is going to be probably assigning which parts are going to do which task.
Yep. So that would be setting these motors to pins 3, 6, and 5. So we know that the only thing that's going to come out of these pins is going to be writing to these motors and telling them what they're going to be doing. We're also going to be writing for inputs what's going to be an input. So we have this PS3 controller here. We're going to write those into pins 9 and 10 and however many other cables there are here. So those will be our inputs. We'll have to write those as analog or digital inputs depending on what they are. And then the loop. Does anyone want to take a guess what's in the loop? Yeah?
Kind of just like look, keep checking every like sensor to see if anything has been inputted. If something is inputted, move it somewhere.
Exactly. What this is going to be is it's constantly going to be checking the inputs for this PS3 controller to see if any of these pins are live or high in our case. So if we're moving forward, we're going to set pin 9 to high, and that means that we're going to be setting these motors to specific things. So this motor is going to be set to, say, 2000, which means that it's going to constantly be going clockwise. This one is going to be set to 1,700, which is going to mean it's going to be moving clockwise as well, but just not as fast. Same with this one, 1,700. And that means that this is going to be moving full speed, and this is going to be moving kind of speed, so that this moves like this, or this. Good. Any other questions? Who's been running into problems with their code that they want me to address, or think it would be good for the class to hear? Anyone else? Yeah?
What's a library and how do you import one?
Good. That's something I should have hit on. So libraries are basically a library of functions that you can use. So someone else wrote a ton of functions and variables that you can just import into your code. It's basically taking their code and copying and pasting it into your code. So if they have functions for how to run their software or their hardware, so let's say these servos, we import the servo library, which basically gives us the commands that we need to make those servos turn in the way that we need. So that'll output the PWM signal that'll let us turn those in the proper manner. The way that we do that is we're going to go to Sketch, Libraries, Import Library, and then the zip for that library, or some other way within the Arduino IDE. Also, IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. It's basically going to give you all the stuff that you need to write in that language. So the Arduino IDE makes it very easy for you to open up the serial monitor to read everything, upload your code, verify that your code will work, compile it in any funny ways, and easily import those libraries. In other languages, they might display all the variables that your code has. It might tell you all the functions that your code has, the different classes, and what they have inside of them. Good. Anyone else? All right.